One of the most difficult things to do when you are deeply immersed in the mechanics of Paradox games is to go back to the absolute basics for the sole purpose of explaining to somebody what we would have considered very common knowledge. Throughout most of my games, you might even notice that I won't even include the footage of me passing certain governance principle laws. That might actually be very bad for the people who watch all the way through, as they probably won't even know why I pick certain laws, nor will they understand that the laws I pick aren't even the best ones for most players. My playstyle seems to favor almost exclusively two governance principles which favor high legitimacy and a respectable return of authority for the least amount of work, so maybe it's not entirely awful that I skip over it. My usual first pick, and sometimes even second pick, isn't exactly meta after all. That would be why I'm returning to an old series, so I can give you a quick glossary explanation as to the value of each and every governance principle there is in the game. I will also highlight the ones that I feel are the most useful, as well as the ones that I personally use the most. There will be no ranking though. Every single governance principle can be useful in the right hands. Your particular favorite might not get much of a highlight though. Theocracy fans in particular will be very unhappy with what I'm about to say, so please, brace yourselves. But before we begin, I'd like to ask everybody to drop a like and subscribe. Maybe even share this video among your friends. Small YouTubers like myself who haven't captured a market really need all the help that we can get. You guys are kings. Anyhow, let's get into the video. Many people will probably turn on this video and immediately expect me to despise Monarchy for all of its flaws. Yet, for all intents and purposes, Monarchy is not a bad governance principle to get stuck with. Though aristocrats get particularly nasty with a plus 25% bonus to their political strength, and you're effectively stuck with the interest group of the monarch, which usually defaults to the landowners with only a few pre-programmed exceptions at the beginning of the game, Monarchy at least receives a sizable amount of interest group endorsement from the devout and petite bourgeoisie, which will actively keep them happy while Monarchy is enacted. At the same time, if you do happen to get lucky and find yourself with an industrialist or intelligentsia monarch, you're pretty much guaranteed a quick and easy transition towards modernization in your economic or cultural laws. Russian players in particular will know the beauty of this aspect of Monarchy all too well. Of course, the biggest benefit to Monarchy can also be its biggest flaw. If you happen to get stuck with a powerful landowner class and a landowner monarch with authoritarian or traditionalist leanings, you'll have very little flexibility and you'll find it a challenge to pass any economic or cultural laws to modernize your country. Usually in a situation like this, moving away from autocracy into oligarchy or wealth voting is your only path forward, which means that Monarchy is at best a double-edged sword. Yet, in the hands of a skilled player who can easily find ways to offload a nasty monarch through abdications, Monarchy is a gem of a governance principle and it should not be overlooked. One of the most maligned governance principles in the game, with good reason, is the Presidential Republic. It suffers from worse ideological penalties than even Monarchy, while at the same time reducing the amount of authority that you get for your trouble. There is a complete lack of flexibility, and you will not be able to change leaders on the fly by maneuvering the leading parties around, like you can with the Parliamentary Republic. However, there are some advantages to the Presidential Republic that can make it shine. It is actually hands-off enough to become my personal republic of choice. The first and perhaps the biggest advantage to the Presidential Republic is the amount of legitimacy that can be accrued when two similar interest groups party together and, through your influence in the election cycles, become powerful. By pairing up the Presidential Republic with wealth voting and including the election cycle random events that you get, you can quickly reduce the political power of the landowners party and greatly increase the power of the usual industrialist/intelligentsia wombo combo party that you get in most games. I find in most of my games I can depower the landowners completely after the second or third election cycle, permanently keeping the industrialists in power even if the intelligentsia happen to break away and form their own party. You can usually maintain over 75 legitimacy without an issue, simply by having the industrialists win every election, as the intelligentsia can join their governments without an issue, even if they're not in the same party. Just recognize that taking Presidential Republic can be extremely dangerous if you happen to go census suffrage or universal suffrage too early. You can and will get stuck with a horrid rural folk government this way, and it will be almost impossible to dislodge them, especially with a rural folk president. Regardless, Presidential Republic isn't as bad as people say it is. However, it is definitely not for beginners. Routinely considered the absolute best governance principle in the game, Parliamentary Republic is a shining example of the value of flexibility. Though you gain no authority, you get most of the benefits of the Presidential Republic without the penalties. There is no government ideology penalty, and you're even given an extra government size allowance. You can even make use of the head of state cheese by swapping out unwanted leaders simply by removing the party that is in power from the government. A new leader will then be chosen based on who has the most clout in the existing government. Easy peasy. The downside, if you can call it a downside, all of the legitimacy bonuses come from votes. There is no simplicity of simply having a head of government make up half or more of your legitimacy. No, your goal is to maintain the ideology of your choice's power through the election cycle events or by carefully selecting who stays in government. It is a bit micromanagey, but you are playing a paradox game after all. However, there is a reason why most people who suggest taking Parliamentary Republic will always aim for Beijing. The Forbidden Palace almost becomes a necessity for this government type, because if you mess up even a little bit in your election cycles and every party ends up with a similar amount of votes, you can find yourself hovering in the mid-30s of legitimacy for the majority of the game. Of course, with even a little bit of careful cultivation of voting influence for most of your favorite ideology groups like the industrialist intelligentsia and trade unions, you can easily maintain 75 plus legitimacy and still easily pull in other groups like the devout or petite bourgeoisie when you need them to pass a law like public healthcare or elected bureaucrats. Parliamentary Republic really is the gold standard of the governance principle choices in the game. Just be careful and don't let the damned rural folk get too many votes. If you couldn't tell, I hate the rural folk interest group. Do you like monarchy, but do you hate the landowners? Are you willing to give up the acceptance bonus of total separation for the sake of it? Well, boy howdy have I got a governance principle for you. Theocracy is effectively monarchy, except instead of the landowners being the overpowered beasts that delay your modernization, it is the devout. You get a plus 25% devout political strength instead of a plus 25% aristocrats political strength, the same 200 authority, the same legitimacy from head of state, and the same 10% government ideology penalty. The downsides? Well, as an interest group, devout really only have three purposes: blocking you from modernizing your church and state, limiting population acceptance, while at the same time giving you public healthcare at a time when even the trade unionists won't. Finally, there's the birth rate bonus from some, but not all, devout interest group happiness bonuses. Of course, if you're going for religious convocation, that's not that bad of a penalty, so maybe, just maybe, this is the right governance principle for you. However, the devout are still pretty poor of an interest group, with only their happiness bonus in some cases being worth the effort. Yet, ironically, Theocracy gives you less of a happiness bonus as the devout only endorse it rather than strongly endorse it, like they do with Monarchy. What a weird setup. All in all, this is probably the only governance principle that I actively avoid. It's pretty much just there for roleplay purposes and for countries like the Papal States to start off with a little flavor. You could probably also use this governance principle to swap from Presidential Republic to Parliamentary Republic, but beyond that, it's not really worth swapping to if you're already a monarchy. Are you at the endgame with 50% trade unionist clout and you're pretty much done passing laws, but you still want to pass laws? Do you care more about standard of living than anything else in the game? Well then, Council Republic is your governance principle. Council Republic is pretty much like the Parliamentary Republic, and it has a great deal of flexibility. In fact, it offers even more flexibility due to the fact that it has a minus 10% government ideology penalty, as well as even more government size allowance. The catch? You won't really want to bring in any other government types because legitimacy from votes is half what you would get from the parliamentary system. If you stray from the trade unionists, you will likely end up in the mid-20s of legitimacy. Of course, if you're going for the Council Republic anyways, that means your intention is to go full communist. You will probably want the trade unionists to be at their peak, so you can force labor laws, collectivize agriculture, single-party state voting, as well as command economy. Your standard of living will skyrocket from here on out. Of course, the downside to Council Republic is that it comes far too late in the game to be anything more than flavor or additional standard of living. This is because it requires socialism to be researched first. Another major downside that most people don't think about is how deeply every other interest group hates Council Republic. You can actually find yourself with some very big happiness malices to other interest groups, making getting their happiness bonuses extremely hard to get and maintain. Here we go. My new favorite governance principle. Yes, I know it's associated with some very naughty boys in history, and in the real world, I am not a fan of corporations. The last thing I would want is to create the world of Cyberpunk 2077. However, can you blame me? How in the heck can I resist the allure of a +2 government size allowance, +1 free company charter, +1 max company, a whopping -25% government ideology penalty, and a beefy +100 authority on top of that? This is not a law that I can resist. Although, it does come with the meh, known as +25% bourgeoisie political strength, and it's exceptionally difficult to pass in the mid-game if you are not lucky enough to get corporatist ideologies in your agitator pool. Perhaps even worse, there are some very hefty downsides to taking the corporate state that you need to account for before diving in. You get 0 legitimacy from votes or head of state. There is a strong likelihood that you will never see 90+ legitimacy in your governments again unless you go single party, oligarchy, or technocracy. You will not get any endorsement from any of the interest groups either, since nobody actively endorses the corporate state. At best, they're neutral. Interestingly enough, even the industrialists oppose it, so don't expect any bonuses towards happiness in the interest groups. Trade unionists especially are cranky if you take this principle. Still, you can routinely keep your legitimacy over 50 for the remainder of the game, even without the help of the Forbidden Palace. The flexibility of changing governments on the fly, even with universal suffrage, makes it a cinch to retread laws that are no longer necessary. If I don't have the infamy reduction modifier from the mandates, I like to get rid of colonial exploitation by this time, since there's no more colonizing to be done. I'll also likely swap off of right of assembly to censorship for the +200 authority if I'm nearing the end of my tech tree. Corporate state makes that really easy to do. You can pretty much have anybody in power with 0 effort on your part, making this the lazy player's ultimate dream government. No micromanagement necessary. Did you know that there is a hidden governance principle in the game? You just have to play through the debug mode to actually get it. When you're in debug mode, you'll have to press the tilde key to open up the console and type in tag and then the 3-letter tag for the decentralized nation that you will want to play as. Doing so will let you play as that decentralized country with the hidden chieftain governance principle and even the Elder Council distribution of power law. I will not go into further detail as to what else you get when you play as a decentralized nation, but I will speak on the value of chiefdom. It's bad. It's really bad. It's effectively monarchy, except it doesn't come with any of the ideological or political strength penalties. Yet, at the same time, you only get 100 authority in turn. No interest groups really support it either, so you don't even get the benefit of making specific interest groups like the devout or petite bourgeoisie happy for having it, like you can with monarchy. Obviously, this is just here to flavor the decentralized nations. Perhaps one day they'll actually be playable without the use of the debug menu. Thank you for watching all the way through. You guys are truly kings. I appreciate all of the support that I have been receiving over the past few months, and I sincerely hope you guys stick around for future videos. I know I have gotten very sappy lately due to some real life issues, but I do want you guys to recognize how short life actually is. Give your loved ones an extra hug today. Maybe forgive a little bit harder if you're not in any danger doing so. Be good to your friends and family and spend as much time as you can with them. They are not here forever, and neither are you. Anyhow, good night and hail Hydra Cat.